I've never been much of a superstitious guy, but looking back, sometimes it feels like certain events in my life were direct signs warning me about what was coming. My name is Jake, and I grew up in a quiet suburb not far from Houston. My parents owned a small shop selling organic products, and from an early age, I saw how hard it is to run your own business. Maybe that's why I'd always dreamed of building something of my own, some sort of coffee shop chain, where everything, from the beans to the interior, would be well thought out and reflect my ideals. I was convinced that by the time I turned 30, I'd have saved enough money and gained enough experience to open the first place and then gradually expand until my dream was fully realized. Whenever I met people who'd say that dreams always remain just dreams, I'd only smirk. Ever since my teens, I'd been sure I would work tirelessly and never let anything stand in my way. The first time I saw Amanda was at the university. We were both studying business administration, though our specialties were slightly different. She leaned more toward the glamorous aspects, PR and marketing strategies, while I was more interested in finance and management. She was striking, long chestnut hair, a constant rotation of lipstick shades, and a confident, light gait. Guys swarmed around her, but there was something in her smile that grabbed my attention beyond just a pretty facade. Maybe it was the spark in her eyes, a blend of ambition and boldness. We ended up talking by chance. A mutual friend invited me to join a study group to help with coursework, and Amanda was there for the same reason. She interrupted me mid-sentence all evening, added corrections, threw out ideas on how better to sell, say, handmade goods on social media. Her energy was infectious. At first, I thought she was a bit arrogant, but by the end of that evening, I realized I wanted to know her better. The next day, we ran into each other in the hallway by the coffee vending machines. She laughed when she saw me, brushed back a strand of hair, and suggested we go get a proper cup of coffee somewhere off campus. I agreed immediately. We headed to a nearby cafe and sat there for 2 hours, talking about everything: our future plans, childhood memories, favorite movies. That's how our relationship started. I didn't even notice how fast she took on a big role in my life, and I got emotionally attached to her even faster. I loved that there was something predatory in her nature. She always wanted more. She dreamed of having her own agency working in event management, PR, and various promotional projects in fashion and beauty. Sometimes we joked that when I opened my first coffee shop, she'd turn it into a trendy brand known from New York to Los Angeles. After graduating, we decided to get married, just like that, without overthinking it. I probably should have been more cautious, but I thought that if there were genuine feelings and shared goals, marriage would only strengthen us. Besides, we weren't kids. I'd started university a bit late for personal and family reasons, and was nearly 25 by the time I graduated. Amanda was only slightly younger. Our parents were happy for us, though they did the typical, "what's the rush" routine. But I held my ground, and Amanda could be extremely persuasive. Our wedding was modest, almost no extra expenses. We decided it was best to start saving right away. My dream was to open a coffee chain. Hers was to advance in PR, maybe move to a major city later on and launch her own agency. Everything seemed so clear and logical. I got a decent position at a consulting firm, thanks in part to a professor I used to help with small university events. Amanda landed a job in the marketing department of a large beauty salon. In the evenings, we came home exhausted but happy. The house was full of catalogs, business plans, spreadsheets of expenditures and revenues. We were constantly drawing up strategies, checking out the competition, watching webinars about promotion. I felt like we were the perfect team. She pointed out ways to attract investors and find niche angles. I handled the analytics because I considered that my strong suit. Plus, I tried to save money literally on everything. My good presentations at work caught the attention of management. I got a raise, and I immediately put the bonus into a separate bank account. Amanda knew about it and also contributed part of her paycheck. We agreed these were our funds that would one day help us, open that first coffee shop. About a year into our marriage, I felt we were hitting a turning point. In one sense, we'd gotten closer, knowing each other's habits inside and out. I'd learned when not to bother Amanda. If she was standing at the mirror, fussing with her makeup and humming nervously, that meant she was annoyed or uncomfortable. She claimed she could read my body language when I was tired or anxious. But at the same time, we started having odd moments of unspoken tension. Sometimes she'd come home in a bad mood and clam up with vague replies. I'd ask if something was wrong at work, and she'd just say, "Everything's fine," then go silent for the entire evening. I didn't make too much of it. I assumed everyone goes through periods of frustration with office life. I thought our shared dreams would still keep us stronger than any routine problems could pull us apart. Then, odd little details started cropping up, which were hard to interpret. For example, on weekends she'd more often say she needed personal space, wanting to meet her girlfriends or do something on her own. Or she'd spend a lot of time on her phone during dinner. Whenever I asked who she was texting, she'd wave me off. Just a work chat, or helping a friend pick out a dress. I tried not to become the jealous husband. I believed trust was the key to a healthy relationship. Besides, I'd had situations where my boss or a client would text me at odd hours. That's just how marketing and PR can be. Someone's always on call. Over time, though, those warning bells got louder. We talked less and less about our future. If I mentioned the coffee shop plans, she'd listen half-heartedly and then change the subject to something more pressing. I started to wonder if we were okay. But maybe I lacked the guts to call it what it was. I chalked it up to a stressful period for both of us. I kept telling myself, it'll pass. Someday we'll look back and laugh about these tough times. And that's how we carried on. Like a couple on a huge ship drifting at sea, losing sight of both land and purpose. I kept putting any extra money from bonuses or side projects into that account. It lifted my spirits to see it grow, convincing me we were inching toward our dream. Amanda sometimes added money, though I wasn't sure exactly how much or how often. Our setup was basically, if you want to contribute, go ahead. Neither of us was checking up on the other. To me, that was the highest form of trust. She never asked me for receipts, and I liked seeing the balance grow, certain that soon everything would change for the better. That daily boost of happiness, seeing how our savings piled up, became part of my routine. Each morning, I'd stand in front of the mirror, imagining our future. I saw myself walking into an empty space smelling of fresh paint, with espresso machines, counters, and display cases. I pictured how our brand would have its own unique vibe, so people wouldn't just come for coffee, but for inspiration. And in that dream, Amanda was beside me, smiling, ready to tell reporters or bloggers about the buzz we were creating. I'd even imagine the social media posts she might write. That vision motivated me more than any energy drink. I loved feeling I was inching closer to everything I'd ever wanted. One day, during a corporate event at my company, I noticed Amanda acting distant. Usually she liked going with me because it was a chance to network and learn new things, or just have fun together. But that night, she said she didn't want to go, so I went alone. Partway through the evening, I spotted her off to the side, quietly talking to a young man, both of them looking like they wanted to stay out of everyone's sight. I felt a twinge of jealousy, but tried not to jump to conclusions. I approached them. The guy's name was Ryan. As it turned out, he worked in a related division of our holding, a partner of my boss. Amanda said she decided at the last minute to come to the event because she wanted to discuss potential joint marketing projects with him. Maybe it was true, but their tense expressions and the way she jumped back when she saw me didn't exactly inspire confidence. Later, on our way home, I asked why she hadn't mentioned she was coming. She shrugged it off. Plans changed last minute. I didn't want to bother you with a call. I sensed something more behind her words, but didn't push. The next day, she told me she had to leave town for work for a couple of days. The salon was presenting a new line of cosmetics in another city. I wished her luck, gave a smile, and tried to stifle my unease. I didn't want to be some insecure husband seeing rivals around every corner. She did take that trip, but came back even more withdrawn. I tried talking, but she blamed stress, saying her bosses were overloading her with tasks. I even encouraged her career ambitions, but inwardly I started clinging more to our savings. That account became my mental life raft. No matter how cold or distant she seemed, at least we were moving toward a shared goal. together. And that comforted me, giving me the strength to reach out to her, to try little surprises. Once, I even dropped by her office with a bouquet of roses, hoping to brighten her workday with a smile. Her colleagues loved it, but she seemed almost embarrassed, as if I'd done something inappropriate. That hurt, but I tried not to overreact. Maybe she was in the middle of an important meeting and I'd interrupted. Weeks passed. I kept telling myself it was just a rough patch. Then came the real alarm bell from the bank. I was expecting a transfer for a consulting side project I'd done, but instead I got a call telling me my account was inactive. I assumed it was a mistake, so I called customer service and they confirmed. "Sorry, sir, but your account was recently closed at your personal request." I almost dropped my phone. That account, where we'd been saving all these years, couldn't have been closed without my knowledge. The representative started explaining that they had my written authorization on file. They switched me to their security department, and I was told they couldn't share details until I came in person. My mind reeled. Why was the account closed? Who had access to the paperwork? Well, from the start, I'd opened the account in my name, but Amanda also had power of attorney. In other words, we both could make decisions regarding it. And now there was this terrifying suspicion. If she knew about it, why didn't she say anything to me? On a more hopeful note, maybe she transferred the money to a better yield account or invested it somewhere. But why keep it secret? Why lie by omission? Deep down, I sensed it wasn't just about finances. When Amanda finally picked up my call, she acted like she had no idea what I was talking about. "Jake, I'm so swamped at work, I can't think about some bank glitch right now. Let's discuss it tonight." I was in my car, leaning my forehead on the steering wheel, and a wave of dread washed over me. After lunch, I left the office on a personal emergency and headed straight to the bank. They seemed sympathetic, but repeated that the account had been closed via a filed request. Then they showed me a copy of the form. The signature was mine, but I had no idea who forged it. The account closure paperwork listed all my personal data: email, phone number, address. Of course, Amanda had all that too. I asked where the funds had been transferred. The security staffer said that was confidential to the recipient, but since I was the owner, I could get a general report. He handed over some papers, and they showed all the money had gone to another account, supposedly also in my name, as though I had opened a new account in the same bank. But I hadn't opened anything. That meant someone had used my personal info to effectively funnel out the entire balance, and I realized who that someone had to be. Driving home, I was torn between overwhelming emotions. Disbelief at myself. Am I seriously suspecting my own wife of doing this? And a stabbing certainty that it really was that bad. When I got to the apartment, she wasn't there. I called her again, no reply. I wrote her texts explaining the situation and asking her to call me. It felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. Why close the account? Who would do that if not her? I tried to rationalize. Maybe she was still planning some investment strategy or something, but the heavy fear in my gut told me I was just grasping at straws. She didn't come home that evening, and I spent the night awake. The next morning, same story. No call back. I went to her workplace, only to discover she'd taken a week off for personal reasons. Her coworkers eyed me curiously, but knew nothing of her whereabouts. One woman quietly mentioned that Amanda had hinted at going to Los Angeles. Nobody knew why or whether it involved me. Suspicious, right? I drove home in shock. No doubt remained, she was gone, along with all the money. Guilt gnawed at me for being so naive. Maybe I had created some idealized version of her and ignored all the glaring signs she wasn't who she claimed to be. Perhaps all her ambition and the constant talk about how we do everything together had just been a mask. But if that was true, why wait so long, years, before skipping out? Why not run off earlier when the sum was smaller? Could it be she did love me once, but then met someone else, like Ryan? Or realized she didn't want a modest life with some average guy dreaming of opening a coffee shop? I spent hours calling lawyers to see if I could get the money back. They mostly shook their heads. We were married, and we both had joint legal authority over that account. Also, the documents bore my signature, albeit forged, which complicates matters. I'd have to prove it was fake, which is tough. We'd need to locate her first to pursue anything in court. Meanwhile, if the money was already transferred and maybe withdrawn in cash, my chances looked slim. My only option was to file a police report and hope they investigated it as fraud. But the lawyers warned me that if she could spin it as a mutual financial decision, the case could drag on for months and end in nothing. That realization hit me like a punch. In an instant, my future was lying in ruins. All I could do was try to find her. I refused to believe this was really happening. I started calling all our mutual friends, visiting those I could, texting others on social media. Almost everyone told me they hadn't seen Amanda in a while or only briefly. She hadn't been in close contact with anyone for some time. I was ashamed to admit, yes, my wife basically stole all our savings and left me stuck with nothing. And as if that wasn't enough, soon I discovered debt. In those last few months, Amanda had taken out several credit cards in my name, each with a sizable limit, and the bills were past due. I found out only when I got the overdue notices. The total balance was huge, and the bank threatened to sue me. It felt like each new day I uncovered some fresh betrayal. Inside, I kept repeating, how? Why? What did I do to deserve this? Eventually, I realized I was living in this apartment still filled with her presence. I couldn't stand it. The kitchen had her boss lady mug I'd given her. The closet was full of her clothes. She'd left most of it behind. That made it even weirder. Did she run away hastily, or leave everything on purpose to mask her trail? I didn't want to throw her stuff out, but I also couldn't bear seeing it. Part of me still clung to a tiny hope it was all some horrific misunderstanding. But reality made it clear I was just fooling myself. To escape, I went back to an old dream. I'd once wanted to get serious about running and maybe even do a marathon. I'd been putting it off for years. Now, though, I started going on nightly runs. Each stride felt like burning off anger, pain, and fear. Physically, I got tired, but my mind circled right back to Amanda. I kept playing out scenarios in which I met her somewhere and confronted her, or she'd show up on my doorstep in tears, begging forgiveness, swearing she'd been forced into it. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The truth is often simpler. She found a way to get everything she wanted without putting in real work. Maybe Ryan helped her. He must have connections, smarts for scams. Maybe it was just the lure of a new business without being tied down to me and my supposedly small-scale, homely ambitions. I created new folders on my computer for documents, statements, email screenshots, anything that might help. The lawyers told me not to lose hope about a lawsuit. But it'd take time, money, and nerves, with no guarantee of a favorable outcome. Meanwhile, my focus at work evaporated. It's tough to advise clients on their financial strategies when you're getting calls from debt collectors and notices about possible legal action. My coworkers noticed something was up. I tried to hide it, but one day I totally messed up an important presentation, forgot half the talking points, couldn't find the slides. My boss pulled me aside to ask what was wrong, and I broke down, telling him about the family disaster. He was sympathetic but said the firm had limits and that maybe I should take unpaid leave to sort things out. I agreed, guessing that likely meant the end of my career there. But honestly, I no longer cared. My entire life and plans had been built around opening that coffee shop. Now that dream existed only in name, my money stolen, my hopes destroyed, and my professional reputation tarnished. Amanda had robbed me not just of my savings, but of my future, and even my trust in people, and in my own instincts. I began to doubt if I could ever trust anyone again, especially someone close. If the person you share your life with can betray you so thoroughly, does that mean everyone's capable of something similar? Initially, I thought that was paranoia, but after weeks of misery, I wasn't so sure. Eventually, I decided I had to leave the city, at least for a while. Maybe I'd move back in with my parents. It felt desperate. But what else was there? They couldn't help much financially, as they barely kept their own shop going, but they'd at least give me moral support. So I packed minimal belongings, some clothes, a couple of books, my laptop, and headed out early in the morning, before I could talk myself out of it. The drive took about 3 hours, during which I kept thinking how I'd explain this to them. I pictured how shocked they'd be. Dad scolding me for letting Amanda near the bank documents, for not double-checking everything. Mom bursting into tears but trying to comfort me. And I knew that even with their support, the internal agony wouldn't just fade. When I finally knocked on their door, my mother's face froze at the sight of me in my suitcase. She had a million questions. I sat down, hugged her, and spent half an hour telling them everything without hiding the grim details, how I trusted my wife blindly and overlooked the obvious signs. Mom listened, hand over her mouth, exclaiming, "It can't be. Why? How could she do that to you?" Dad pulled up a chair, frowning, asking for details about the bank, the forged papers. Even though it hurt to go through it all again, I needed to get it out. The more I laid out the timeline, the clearer it became that Amanda had been planning this for a while. I recalled her talks about better bank deals and higher interest rates in a new fund, which I'd brushed aside, busy as I was with my regular job. Dad just shook his head, muttering it was a bona fide crime. They suggested I stay with them, and the next day I'd go talk to an acquaintance in the local police force. Part of me kept thinking, what if she's already in Los Angeles? Maybe she'll call me and explain everything. But my phone stayed silent. That evening in my old childhood bedroom, I didn't sleep. I lay there sifting through memories of me and Amanda, hiking outside the city where she yelled joyfully at the sunset, the time I gave her a ring on our anniversary, though I was broke, and how she jumped for joy. Back then I thought I'd found my lifelong partner. And now all those memories felt like one giant con. I curled up under the blanket, choking down the bitterness rising in my throat. Had she been living with me while secretly thinking, when's the best time to scam him? Or did something finally push her over the edge? Did we ever share any real love? The next morning, I woke up exhausted but determined to act. I visited the local police station, explained everything to my dad's acquaintance, showed my files. He said it was serious, that we'd need to go through the courts as well. And we had to understand that plenty of folks get conned by their own family members, so it's tough to prove malicious intent over joint financial decisions. Still, he'd at least try to see if Amanda was involved in any similar schemes. I didn't know whether to thank him or just gloomily nod. Progress seemed unlikely to be quick. I filled out a mountain of paperwork, provided the lawyer's contacts, gave details of all the transactions. Meanwhile, more notices arrived for overdue payments on credit cards I'd never known existed. The amounts were staggering, and debt collectors started calling, threatening action. I told them this was fraud, that I was litigating. They didn't care. They wanted money. My parents couldn't even begin to cover it. So there I was, not just broke, but also in some mysterious debt I hadn't even authorized. My friends from college were sympathetic but clueless. They just said Amanda wasn't responding to anyone and had gone off the grid online. Her accounts were still up but frozen. No new posts, likes, stories. I checked them multiple times a day, hoping for a fresh sign that might reveal her location, but nothing. It was like she'd deliberately left no trace. Indeed, she might have started a whole new life with a brand new name. My anger turned into apathy. I walked around my parents' house like a ghost, no idea what to do. Sometimes I helped in their shop, unloading crates of produce, but there was a constant heaviness inside me. Dad saw I needed emotional relief, but had no clue how to give it. Mom tried to suggest solutions, like filing for divorce and fighting the debts, but everything required time, nerves, and money for lawyers, and I had none of that left. My energy had been drained by the betrayal of the person I'd trusted most. A week later, a coworker from my old firm called, saying I was needed for a meeting with the department head. I knew it wouldn't be good. I'd botched that key presentation, then vanished. I still showed up, trying to look put together. My manager, Mr. Walters, a straightforward, tough guy, said the company had decided not to renew my contract, citing my inability to perform in my current personal situation. They'd give me a small severance, and that was it. He shook my hand and expressed regret, adding that maybe if I resolved everything, I could come back someday. Deep down, I knew I wouldn't. I'd lost all bearings by that point. I used to imagine quitting on my own terms when I was ready to open my coffee shop. And now I was getting fired, with my dream shattered by the lack of money, my reputation marred by personal chaos. Stepping outside the office, I felt empty. A flashback came to me of how I first met Amanda and how she seemed so alive, confident, and fearless. Maybe that was exactly what I lacked. the willingness to grab life by the throat and push forward at all costs. But I never wanted to be cynical or unscrupulous. My whole life I'd prided myself on being kind, honest, decent. Now those qualities felt more like weaknesses, making me an easy target. On my way back to my parents' place, I detoured to a lakeside where Amanda and I once strolled. I sat on the shore, watching the sunlight glisten on the water, thinking that my life couldn't just end because of one betrayal. I either had to fight or surrender to endless depression. And if I gave up, there was a good chance the bank would come after my one apartment in the city, even though I'd owned it before the marriage. Maybe I'd lose that too. Obviously, I had no choice but to fight. But fight what, exactly? To get her locked up, I'd have to find her first. If she was far away living under the radar, would the authorities even bother? Suddenly, I had an idea. What if I posted about this on Reddit or another forum? A detailed story that might help me find people who'd encountered her under an alias. Or at least I could find emotional support and advice from others who'd been scammed. I'd seen stories of that kind before. People sharing their heartbreak and sometimes stumbling onto solutions. I signed up with a new nickname and poured out a long post about everything that happened, leaving out real names but explaining how my wife had collected money for our common goal and then run off with it, leaving me deep in debt. I didn't expect a miracle, just wanted to vent. To my surprise, I got hundreds of replies. People offered legal tips, shared contacts of nonprofits, wrote that they'd been in similar situations. One user linked me to a resource for victims of fraud, where you could even post a reward for information. I suddenly realized I wasn't as alone as I'd felt. In the following days, I practically lived online, hunting for any clue. Some people said they'd heard of a similar scam in California. Others speculated that maybe a new boyfriend pushed her into this. Still others tried to console me, urging me to keep my head up. One comment read, "Check all the hotels in LA in case she used your name." I tried, but that required a credit card or reservation details. Complicated. Still, I couldn't stop thinking that maybe she really had headed to Los Angeles. Perhaps that was part of her plan to get a foothold in the PR world, financed by me. Then a few weeks later, I got a call from one of Amanda's old friends, Sophia. They'd been closer before the wedding, but not so much after. Sophia sounded uneasy on the phone, said she had something to tell me. We met at a cafe near my parents' place. She was clearly anxious, glancing around as if she were afraid of being overheard. She sipped her tea, and I drank my coffee. Then she told me a shocking story. About a month before Amanda vanished, Amanda asked Sophia to lend her some documents so she could finalize a deal for a client. Sophia, being naive and trusting her old friend, handed over some photocopies. Afterwards, Amanda dodged any questions about it, then stopped responding to Sophia. Eventually, Sophia felt guilty and panicked, but didn't know how to approach me until now. I thanked her for telling me, even though my hands were shaking with anger at the thought of how extensively Amanda had schemed. I asked if Sophia knew anything about Amanda's going to LA or anywhere else. She hesitated, then said she vaguely remembered Amanda hinting about a new life and serious investors in some western state, but no specifics. She then dropped another bomb. Amanda had once confessed she was seeing some promising guy named Ryan who might finance her new agency, and that the situation with him was complicated, but they had a special connection. I froze. So there had been an affair. I hadn't been paranoid. All those times I tried to give Amanda the benefit of the doubt. Turned out she'd been secretly involved with him the whole time. I thanked Sophia, told her I understood how frightened she must be to be tangled in this. She asked if I was planning to do anything. I said I wasn't sure. Legal methods were slow, but at least I had a new lead. His name was Ryan, and he might be her accomplice. Maybe I could find out what company he worked for. After we parted, I felt a surge of grim determination. I was sick of feeling helpless. I didn't care anymore if it was legal or not. If the law wouldn't help me fast enough, I'd do whatever I had to. That night, I set about searching LinkedIn and Facebook for any Ryan connected to PR agencies, beauty salons, marketing, or anything Amanda had been involved in. I found dozens of profiles, most of them in other states or just not matching his face. Then I remembered someone had taken pictures at that corporate event where I'd seen him with Amanda. A friend had snapped group photos on his phone. I got in touch with him and asked for anything that might show Ryan. He sent me a few pictures. In one of them, you could see Ryan in the background. I saved that image and tried running a reverse search. No luck, except for a private Instagram account with no public info. I messaged him, but got no reply. I stayed up all night playing amateur detective, fueled by the hope of at least confronting Amanda or her accomplice. By dawn, my head was pounding, and I fell asleep at my desk. When I woke, I found a text from an unknown number. "Back off while you still can. Mind your own business." My stomach knotted, reading it as a threat. Had someone realized I was snooping? It could have been spam, but the timing was too suspicious. A wave of fear passed through me, but weirdly, it stoked my anger more. I decided I'd push even harder. A couple of days later, I nearly lost it when collectors from one of the banks showed up at my parents' house to confront me face to face. They warned that if I didn't pay something soon, they'd start repossession and proceed aggressively. My mother wept, begging them to understand I was the victim of a scam, and my father nearly got into a fistfight with them. I ended up promising to scrape together a first payment. But I had no money, no clue where to get it. My entire savings existed only as a forgery on a sheet of paper. I had reached a crisis point. My life was unraveling, and if I didn't do something drastic, everything would collapse completely. Suddenly, I realized my last shot might be going to Los Angeles myself. Everyone, from her coworker to her friend, had mentioned LA as a possibility. If that's truly where she went, maybe I could find her. My parents panicked at the idea. "Son, you have no solid address. You'll be throwing yourself to the wind. How will you afford it?" But I waved it off. I had just enough cash to pay for a cheap motel, at least for a little while. Maybe I could find a temporary job, anything, but I couldn't just wait around. If I didn't do it, I'd torment myself forever for not trying. Early in the morning, I packed a small bag with clothes, my laptop, the photo of Ryan, and all my documents, and drove off before anyone could stop me. The whole way to LA, I questioned whether it was pointless. Maybe Amanda wasn't in Los Angeles at all. Maybe she was in New York, or even left the country. But I told myself it couldn't get any worse. She'd already stolen my savings, gutted my future, and left me in debt. I had to try to find answers. I arrived in Los Angeles and booked the cheapest motel room I could find on the outskirts. I went to a few co-working spaces and marketing agencies, claiming I was looking for a contact named Ryan, showing his photo. People mostly looked at me like I was crazy. A few mentioned there were countless Ryans around. I made up stories about a lost number, a lost partnership. Some folks said they'd keep an eye out. I stopped by beauty salons, asking if Amanda had worked there. Nothing. I spent nearly all my money traveling around the city, handing out business cards, leads, and dead ends. Some evenings I just parked by the beach, staring at the ocean, feeling that I was close to giving up. I asked myself why I was doing this. Maybe I just wanted to look her in the eye and say, "Why did you do this to me? Did I ever deserve this?" Eventually, my funds ran out. I figured I had no way to keep paying for my motel. On the last night, I went to a bar, planning to have a stiff drink and then drive back home. While I was there, hunched over my glass, I overheard a couple at a nearby table laughing about some Amanda who'd pulled off a financial con against her boyfriend. I almost jumped out of my chair, heart pounding. I politely interrupted, asking if they knew the Amanda I was looking for. Turns out, one of them had just heard a rumor about some girl scamming her partner at a private club run by a sketchy owner. Maybe her name was Amanda. Maybe not. They weren't sure, but just the mention of it fired me up with a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe she really had been in LA, trying to break into the big leagues with stolen money. That glimmer lasted until the next morning, when I realized I still had no solid lead. I had to go home. Wandering around a massive city penniless was pointless. My obsession with finding Amanda was wrecking me even more. I packed up the car with just enough gas to get back and headed out. It was a long drive, and for hours I stared at the highway, feeling like my life was one endless road to nowhere. When I finally pulled into my parents' driveway, the house was silent. They were at work. I brought my bag to my old room, collapsed on the bed, and shut my eyes. My mind was blank. After a while, I went to check my email on my laptop, and there it was, a message from the lawyers. "Jake, we've got a lead. Call us ASAP." My heart lurched. I grabbed my phone, and they explained that Amanda was spotted trying to transfer a large sum from one account to another, and the bank flagged suspicious activity. This could be our break. They might freeze part of the funds if we acted quickly and filed new motions. And in that moment, I understood. Even if she was hiding out, even if she'd betrayed me and stolen every dime, I would keep fighting. Maybe I'd never get her back, but at least I might force her to face some consequences. Maybe I could reclaim a fraction of my dream, or at least get some justice. I stood up and looked in the mirror, hardly recognizing the man staring back. This was a different Jake now. Hurt, battered, but maybe stronger and more grown up. I had no idea how the story would end, but I knew I had to move forward despite the pain. I couldn't let this betrayal define me forever. Even if I'd lost my savings and my wife, I felt a tiny spark left in me that refused to die. It demanded that I not give up, if only to prove that no betrayal can fully extinguish my self-belief or my chance to rise again, even if it meant starting from scratch. My heart clenched at the thought of a long fight ahead, but somewhere deep inside I sensed that time might eventually put things in their place, and my job was not to let this ruin me. I had to decide what part I'd play in this story. The broken man who quit halfway, or someone who channeled his pain into a new beginning. I closed my eyes and remembered the smell of roasted coffee beans, the taste of strong espresso, and the old mock-ups of my planned cafe interior. I refused to let her steal that from me forever. Yes, Amanda had betrayed our shared dream, but I still had the right to a new life in which I'd pursue that dream, even if I had to do it alone. I took a deep breath, pulled out the notebook of coffee shop ideas, and flipped open to the first page. At the bottom were our signatures. "We can do anything." I ran my finger over her name, brushed it aside, and set my hand on my own, whispering quietly, "I can do it without you."